Afternoon, hello, good evening. It is 4 o'clock at Geneva time, and with that, we'd like to start the second of today's events of Minamata Online on Articles 21 and Articles 15. So, welcome very much to all of you to our session. My name is Claudia Tenhafer. I'm the Senior Policy and Coordination Officer of the Secretariat, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Lara Ognibene and Marianne as we walk you through this topic today. We hope, of course, that we find you and your teams and loved ones well at this rather uncertain time for many, and hope that while we can't be with you in person to assist you as parties on obligations and thereof, that at least these sessions that we are doing online go some way to help both in terms of the work that you do and also the rest of the Minamata community. I'd just like to introduce that, but I see many of you are repeatedly joining us, so you've heard us say this before, that Minamata Online has 3 streams that will be the events will be taking place between now and December. The stream that you would probably have attended last week was that of Cop4 preparations, very much in those 2 meetings linked to the effectiveness evaluation work that needs to be prepared intercessionally until Cop4. Today we kick off the stream that I lead, implementation, review and support, the first of a number of topics under this. And this stream is also complemented by another on science that my colleague Icc leads, and all the details of which are in this calendar. So please click in and note the ones that you would like to attend. But turning to today, the topic of today is to speak about Article 21 reporting and also to speak a little bit about Article 15, that is the Implementation and Compliance Committee. In many ways, this is we chose this as the topic to set us off because it is one of the big topics, the overarching topics of the working of the entire convention. Before I dive into the topic, I'd just like to make a couple of housekeeping, so to say, comments. The first is that you will have noted that this event is recorded. We will make the presentations available after the event on our website, and we also make the recordings available. We had this event also this morning to cater more for the Asian or the East side perspective in terms of hemisphere and time zones, so you can also see that event that took place earlier today. And before I really jump in, I just want to take a moment to also thank the behind-the-scenes team, Tuck, for setting everything up and hosting us, being also supported by Lynn and Pablo. And I'd also like to mention a colleague that you don't see, but whose work is very much behind the work of our work on reporting, which is Anna, our communications officer. With that, let me jump into today's topic, which is Article 21 reporting and Article 15, the Implementation and Compliance Committee. We've structured today's session in 4 steps. First, I will give you a very brief overview of the Minamata Convention. Many of you are very, very familiar with this, but this is just to give you the bird's eye view of where the reporting is in fact situated. After that, we'll go a little bit into Article 21 reporting to tell you both in terms of what the obligations are, what the processes have been so far, and also looking forward. And then my colleague Lara will be taking us through Article 15, the Implementation and Compliance Committee, a really foundational part of our convention, of course. And then we stand ready to answer or attempt to answer any questions or answers that you may have for us. With that, let me begin with a bird's eye view of the Minamata Convention. You may have seen this slide before or a version of it, but of course, as you know, our convention is set in a life cycle in terms of the order of the articles and in terms of the logic of the articles that constitute the convention, starting with Article 3 on the supply and sources of Mercury, moving to a number of articles that look at the uses and presence of Mercury in our economy, our industry and society, and then of course with the overall aim, which is the objective of the convention, to reduce the emissions and releases of mercury into the environment, both in terms of the impacts of human health and also environment. these control measures, these so-called control measures, are very much supported and structured and enabled by another set of very important measures of the convention, going all the way from Article 13 on the financial mechanism down to Articles 25 onwards that give detail on procedural matters. But for today, we will be looking specifically at Article 21 reporting, as mentioned, and Article 15 ICC. Moving on to reporting. Many of you will know this text well, not only because you were with us in the negotiations, but also because you might be national focal points of your countries and have looked at all of this in detail as well. But for everybody's benefit, let me just read paragraph 1, which is very much the paragraph that sets out of this article what reporting entails. It reads, each party shall report to the conference of the party through the Secretariat on the measures it has taken to implement the provisions of the Convention and on the effectiveness of such measures and the possible challenges in meeting the objective of the Convention. I'd like to just pause here for a moment and just make the point that it is not only about reporting on the measures that have been taken, but also giving space for parties to reflect on how effective their measures have been, and also to reflect on the challenges that they might be facing to be in the way or as they are implementing the conventions. Overall, reporting enables that the COP has a way to review how parties are progressing in the implementation of the provision of the conventions. Following this text in Article 21, the COP at its first meeting in 2017 decided, after a fair amount of conversation and consideration of exactly how to put together a format of reporting for the Minamata Convention, decided in its decision 1.8 on the timing and format of the reporting. According to that decision, parties shall report every 4 years using the full format that is set out in that decision, and every 2 years shall answer 4 questions. These are questions marked by an asterisk, and that all of these reports shall be received by the Secretariat by the 31st of December of that following year. This means that parties provide information on their state of implementation according to the report, to the format, every 2 years. They answer 4 questions in the biennial short reports, and parties answer all 43 questions in the biennial long reports. Just keeping the previous slide in mind, where I divided control measures on the one hand to enabling and supportive context in the other, just to note that of those 43 questions, 32 are on control measures, while 11 deal with questions on enabling and supportive context. There are a number of other paragraphs in that decision, and it bears reminding or remembering that at the time, the Conference of the Party was, of course, learning also from other conventions and their reporting formats and methodologies. And there was a hope and an anticipation and expectation that reporting under the Minamata Convention would be aided by electronic means. And so this decision includes text that says that the Secretariat is to provide parties with an electronic version of this report to make the format available for reporting, and also to enable future reporting to make electronic versions of past reports available so that countries can update them as appropriate. Lastly, I'd just like to draw your attention to the last paragraph in that decision, which reads, it further requests the Secretariat to provide information, including the reporting rate, to the Conference of the Parties to assist in its review pursuant to Article 23, paragraph 5c. And that article is the one that sets out the functions of the Conference of the Parties, the highest decision-making of this convention, which reads that it shall keep under continuous review and evaluation the implementation of this convention, and to that end shall regularly review all information made available to it and the Secretariat pursuant to Article 21. With this as background, and I realize that on the left, the screenshot is much too small to read, but that is the beginning of the annex that is attached to that decision, setting out the approved or the agreed reporting format. But just to highlight, I realize many of you know this very well, but for those that might not have dealt with the format so intimately yet, it is divided into 4 parts. The first part is general information, party-specific information, which includes contact details, the name of the focal point, etc. Part B is really the meat of the report, because here are the questions that are to be answered by parties. C is an opportunity to comment on challenges that the parties may be facing in meeting their objectives, and Part D provides opportunity to comment on the reporting format and possible improvements. Just to pause here for a moment is that underlying the entire time of negotiations of the Minamata Convention was the hope and expectation that the convention could be facilitative and supportive of implementation, and also cognizant of possible challenges that could be there. And so this reporting format specifically makes provision for such feedback from parties in Part C. And Part D, reporting formats may need to be improved upon or may need to be added upon for clarity, and some of that only becomes known as we implement it, as we work through it. And so the approved reporting format makes provision for comment from parties to improve this as well. So we are in a constant expectation of being able to improve our ability to help parties report to the Minamata Convention. I mentioned national focal points, and so just quickly wish to briefly stop here, because of course the role of national focal points is captured in Article 17, where it says that each party shall designate a national focal point for the exchange of information under this convention, including with regard to the consent of importing parties under Article 3. We will have a separate session on Article 3 and trade, and specifically in the coming weeks, and we'll delve much into that. But let me just show you what we know right now on national focal points to the Minamata Convention. This is one of a number of visuals prepared by Anna that I find very illustrative of where we are in Minamata, and I think it is something to be proud of as the Minamata family, to say that 91% of parties have reported, fully reported their national focal points. This is really, really very, very good, and we are very happy that parties have taken this obligation so seriously and have maintained the contact details of national focal points in this way. If you would like to know who the national focal point of your country is, or that of another, or just would like to check out how this works in terms of national focal points, I've pasted just a screenshot of our website there. Under countries, you will find the tab focal points, and if you press that, you will find this page here with the whole world displayed, and a drop-down menu with countries, all the parties that there are, and their national focal points. You will find that some parties have designated 2 names, perhaps because a duty is shared, but you will find all of the details of the designated individuals there. Should you not yet have, as party, not yet have notified us of your focal point and wish to be supported in that way, on that page you will also find a model letter in this regard and a form to fill out. But should there be anything else that we can be assisting you on, please just get in touch. And my colleague Lara in particular takes care of this with the support of another colleague. Moving on, we thought it might be helpful just to look at the 4 questions that were just reported on. The COP had decided that the first reports, which were the short reports where only 4 questions are answered, were due by 31st of December 2019. And these are the 4 questions that parties were requested to report on. The first 3 are all related to Article 3. And the first one is, does the party have any primary mines that were operating within its territory at the date of entry into force for the party? The second one is about whether the party has endeavored to identify individual stocks of mercury exceeding 50 metric tons, and sources of mercury supply generating stocks exceeding 10 metric tons. For this particular question, as many of you will remember well, Cop1 also passed very specific guidance. And so this is also, of course, available on our website in terms of how to identify individual stocks, etc. The third question deals more specifically with trade and reads, has the party received consent or relied on a general notification of consent in accordance with the Article 3, including any required certification from importing non-parties for all exports of mercury from the party's territory in that reporting period? You will see that while that is the question, if a party answers yes, there are some follow-up questions, including to provide copies of the consent form if that has not already been done, and other such follow-up. And lastly, the fourth question is at the other end of the spectrum, the waste end of the spectrum of our life cycle, in fact, at the disposal end of it, because the question is, are there facilities for final disposal of waste consisting of mercury and mercury compounds in the party's territory? And if so, how much waste was subject to final disposal and under which disposal operation methods? So in short, while there are 4 questions, depending on the answer of yes and no, there's some follow-up items that parties have been requested to submit information on. To support parties to make the reports for December 31st in last year, we built an online reporting tool, which was essentially an electronic questionnaire tool that follows the agreed reporting format. The tool is available in all official languages of the United Nations, and the national focal points are the ones that receive the login credentials to submit the report. And with that, we also produced an information document to assist countries to answer the questions that were in the short reporting format, in other words, those marked by an asterisk. This is a small booklet displayed on the right of this screen, available in all 6 languages, and includes frequently asked questions per question, as well as other additional information that might be helpful to countries, to the officials that are responsible for putting together these reports. For all other information that we put together for last year's reporting and all other information in terms of guidance for all future reporting that is available now is of course available on our website. This is another slide we are actually quite proud of, because Minamata has a 78, almost 79% reporting rate. So we have a very, very high reporting rate of reports received for the short reports December 2019. And every time we have another report coming in, you will see this bar move. For those countries that might not yet have completed the reports, please get in touch with us if we can be helpful. If you need any other information in addition to the information displayed earlier in the information document to complete, or if you may have a technical problem or a technical question to access, Anna and Lara, we would be happy to help you in this regard. I do just want to point out that I have to just congratulate Central and Eastern Europe as the region where all parties have completed their reporting, which is of course excellent. Which brings me to what happens next. We have received these reports and now are undertaking roughly 3 steps. Firstly, as reports came in, they were being acknowledged and checked for completeness. You may recall that the decision earlier said that parties were to receive an electronic copy of their report. This would have also reached the party again. If you do not have an electronic version of your completed report, please let us know and we should be very happy to send it to you again. But once we have checked reports for completeness, the Secretariat also carries out a check on the data and information to the extent possible that has been submitted. and if necessary, the Secretariat sends queries to the party for clarification on the data and information submitted. We are still in the process of a number of small checks that we have, small clarifications with some parties' reports, but we have made great progress on this second step. Once the second step is duly completed, the data and information provided by parties is used in the preparation of a number of different documents for the COP, for the Implementation and Compliance Committee, and also to be made available on the Minamata Convention website. So in the bubbles there, you see some of the reports that will be forthcoming based on the information received. And before I hand over to Lara to take us through the Implementation and Compliance Committee, just a short heads up, looking ahead. The next reports will be the full format reports, the full biannual reports, which will be due not this year, but the end of next year, December 2021. At the most recent COP here in Geneva in November last year, the COP decided in Decision 313 to request the Secretariat to provide or to draft guidance for completing the full national reporting format. So this is work we are currently engaged in terms of preparing the draft. This draft will be available next year, March, also for comment, and will then be made available as a revised draft guidance as appropriate. Should you have any questions already as you may be reviewing the questions of the full reports or any other comments you wish to let us know as a Secretariat about questions that might not be clear enough to you or questions where you would like to have more explanation of, please let us know so that we can also take this into consideration as we're preparing the guidance. And lastly, I just wanted to say that not only are we proud and happy that we have received so many of the reports, but there are also a number of countries that have actually already submitted full biennial reports. So thank you very much for this extended effort. All the information is very gratefully received. And with that, I leave you in the good hands of my colleague, Lara Ognibene. Please, Lara.
Thank you, Claudia. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. My name is Lara Ognibene. I'm a legal and program officer in the Secretariat. And I will now walk you through Article 15 on Implementation and Compliance Committee. So you see on this slide the text of the article, which comprises of 6 paragraphs. The Article 15 identifies the committee as the subsidiary body of the COP and then describes its functions, its membership, and then the triggers, meaning the ways or information can be submitted to the committee for its consideration. So moving to the next slide, Article 15 establishes the committee to promote implementation and and review compliance with all the provisions of the convention. And the spirit of the article is really or what the negotiators had in mind when they agreed on this article is to establish a mechanism to support parties in the implementation of and compliance with the convention, paying particular attention to each party national capability. So it is in this spirit that the committee is supposed to review information submitted to it and then provide recommendations. The committee shall examine both individual and systemic issues of implementation and compliance and then make recommendations as appropriate to the COP. The committee consists of 15 members nominated by parties and elected by the COP. More information on the membership and the previous meetings of the committee is available on our website, so please feel free to check in case you want to have more information on those issues. Moving to the next slide. So as I mentioned before, paragraph 4 of Article 15 provides a list of triggers. So the committee may consider issues on the basis of 3 sets of information. So first, from written submissions from each party with respect to its own compliance. Secondly, from national reports submitted to the Secretariat in accordance with Article 21. And thirdly, from requests from the COP. The committee shall make every effort to adopt its recommendations by consensus, but if consensus is not reached, recommendation can be adopted by 3/4 majority vote of the members present and voting, based on a quorum of 2/3 of the members. Here is the Cop2 decision on the Icc, so decision 2.4, which includes the the rules of procedures of the committee as approved by Cop2. The rules of procedure set rules on how to elect officers, select the chair and vice chair, provide more information or rules on the functioning of the Icc, its membership, how meetings of the Icc are to be arranged, on the preparation of the agenda, on the participation of observers, and so forth. Another relevant COP decision is decision 3.9 adopted by our last COP3 in November last year. In this decision, the COP adopted terms of reference for the committee, further elaborating the functions of the committee and in particular the triggers for the committee. And then also in the same decision, COP3 adopted a template for written submissions from parties with respect to their own compliance. And this template is available in the Annex 2 to the decision. Focusing on the terms of reference adopted by COP3, first of all, the terms of reference provide more insight on regarding paragraph 4A of Article 15 of the Convention, which relates to written submissions and specifies that the content of the submission must be in line with the adopted template, as mentioned before, which is available in Annex 2. Specifies deadlines for the submission of any supplementary information for the committee's attention by the concerned party, and also specifies possible outcomes of the Icc consideration on the matter under review, including recommendation to the party concerned as well as to the COP. Regarding the following paragraphs, subparagraphs of paragraph 4 of Article 15, the terms of reference further specify that the Secretariat shall distribute to the committee all submitted national reports, as well as any requests made by the COP within 2 months of the conclusion of the COP at which the request was made. The Secretariat is also to prepare relevant reports for the committee on the national reports, and this has already been mentioned in by Claudia in the first part of this presentation. The next committee meeting is going to be held in the first half of 2021, and will consider, among other items, the report prepared by the Secretariat based on Article 2021 reporting, and which will also include an assessment of performance and an identification of issues they may emerge from the reports. Again, this has been already described by Claudia previously. And finally, the committee is also supposed to prepare its own report and including possible recommendations to our next COP in November 2021. The committee, then next slide, yes. Finally, the terms of reference adopted by COP3 also identify types of recommendations to the COP that the committee may consider. These include, for example, steps to support the party or parties in implementing the provisions of the convention. The ICC may also identify the need for the concerned party or parties to develop and submit to the committee a strategy to achieve implementation and compliance associated with a time schedule, and to report on the implementation of the said strategy back to the committee. It may also identify the need for expert assistance, including on legal, institutional, or technical matters that may be relevant to the issue of compliance or implementation. Also, the committee may identify targeted capacity building, financial and technical assistance that could be provided to the party or parties, subject, of course, to the availability of resources. And as a last resort, the committee could also recommend that the COP adopts a statement regarding compliance. This is the end of our presentation. We will now move to a Q&A session. And of course, I remain at your disposal. Should you have any questions, I'll be happy to respond. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lara. I'm Marianne Bailey, and I'm going to facilitate the question and answer segment of our information session. So far, however, we have no questions in the Q&A box or in the chat box. So I'd like to give everyone a few moments to just reflect on whether you have questions, and feel free to put them in the Q&A box, or if you have trouble finding that, the chat box will also work. Thank you. Like our session earlier today, our presenters were so complete and thorough and clear in their presentation that perhaps there are no questions at all, which is fine. But we welcome your questions or comments. And I do see one now. Thank you. Just navigate. So we do have a, sorry. Okay, we do have a question from Terry Keating, my former colleague. Hello, Terry. How is the membership of the ICC decided? So Lara, could I turn that one to you? Or let's see, Claudia, might you be able to
sorry,
Lara
may have a technical problem. Yes,
yes.
Thank you, Tuck, for taking us back to this particular slide. At the very bottom, you will see that the committee consists of 15 members that are nominated by parties. These 15 members divide up into the 5 UN regions. That means that there are 3 persons, 3 members, 3 party representative persons
that are put forward per region. These names come to the COP within by a certain time limit, and the COP then confirms the election of these individuals as the members of the Implementation and Compliance Committee. Just to add that regions have maybe different modalities in how they select who to put forward and nominate for these very important positions. And so there may be regional differences in how that is done. But one thing that is important is that the original text of the convention makes explicit that there should be the appropriate expertise represented on the ICC, and that is not only necessarily, of course, in implementation and compliance matters, but also the gambit of technical information that would need to be looked through by such a committee. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you.
Lara? Yes.
Yeah, I apologize. I think I had not pressed the button. Yeah, I thank you, Claudia, for stepping in which is, it's of course correct what you said. The membership of the committee is regulated by the rules of procedure of the committee, which were adopted by Cop2 in decision 2.4. And so Rule 3 regulates the membership, and in particular, if I may add, at the third meeting of the COP, the parties elected 10 members from among the first members of the committee for 1 term, and elected 5 new members for 2 terms. And from now on, the COP at every ordinary meeting will elect for 2 terms new members to replace those members whose period of office is about to expire. So it will be, the COP will not re-elect every 15 members every time, but there is going to be a turnover of members elected. Some new members elected for 2 terms, and others remaining from the previous election of the COP. Thanks.
Thank you, Lara. We're getting some very good questions in on reporting. So Claudia, I will turn these to you, and so far we have 3 of them. So I'll go to the very practical ones first. So Vivian is thanking us for the presentation, and she asks, would we please inform, if a country didn't report the short biennial report yet, whom should they contact to proceed forward?
Sure, that's an easy one. We have a general email, and Vivian, I would just encourage you to reach out to us on this general email. It is always staffed. One of us is always looking at this email, or many of us are, and we can help you with regard to the information on that. So just reach out and we'll be right back in touch.
Thank you. You should be able to see that address on your screen. And from Tracy, she says, you mentioned the national reports under Article 21 will be used in reporting to the COP and the ICC. So she's looking to clarify that the individual party reports will also be made public. And if so, what is the expected timeline for publication?
It is indeed the intention of the Secretariat to make all of the reports public, because these are elements that go to the COP, and just as COP documents are public documents in that setting, so the reports need to be able to be accessed by parties as part of the overall working of the Minamata Convention. We are, as mentioned, we are looking at completing some clarifications that we would like to have completed as a whole, and we are going to be making our presentation of this to the Bureau when it meets in October, and we should be able to then clarify exactly by what time we can make the reports available. Let me just also add that the reports go to the Implementation and Compliance Committee, and that committee is set to meet in early next year. Thank you.
Great. And a very related question from Carlos is, can we post here the link for the 2019 national reports on the website? And I would just say that when those are becoming available, per Claudia's response just now, it would be on the country tab on our website under reporting. And Claudia, please correct me if I've said anything incorrect on that, but I think that is where we're at. And then I'd like to go back up to a question received earlier from Tim, which is a broader question. Have we seen any sort of lessons learned or observations from the first short national reports so far?
We have seen some observations. Firstly, just a very positive one is just the amount of reports that have come in and the completeness of them. It probably says a lot also in terms of the way the questions were phrased, very direct questions and questions that very practical questions. And so I think that may have helped countries in that. So from that perspective, the fact that the questions are very targeted seems to have been very helpful to countries. We notice here and there that a question is maybe not completely clear in a national context. And sometimes that has now led us to seek more clarifications. And we as a Secretariat are making note of that and will, of course, bring that to the attention as necessary to either the ICC or the COP. We don't see any major worries yet with these 4 questions as they are stated, but we do see that there could be a small clarification on at least one of them that might be helpful for the future. I also want to just mention that we were made aware that perhaps in Arabic, one of the questions is a bit difficult to understand, and we're just checking back into that one. So just as a comment, but these very, let's say, editorial level comments. At a bigger level, we see that these are the first 3 questions are really questions at the beginning stage of the life cycle. So where the mercury comes from, either from mines or from other sources, other stocks that are available currently in countries, in the economy, in the industry. That, of course, the convention seeks to reduce over time, etc. So it is the 4 questions that the convention that the COP has chosen to prioritize are a very interesting view on just looking where is the mercury at this stage. And all 3 of these questions will become also important for our later and our other understanding in terms of the progress being made. So it is a good view in terms of seeing what's happening at the national level on very direct control mechanisms that have a quicker impact than, let's say, the control mechanisms on emission. So this is one, let's say, general headline comment that one can make. On the waste is on the tail end of things, and it is an article where there was still some work to be done to complete it by the time this particular question was chosen for the reporting format. So maybe this is something to keep in mind for the future in case there are other questions or additional questions that would need to be kept in mind given follow-up decisions on mercury waste. But this just as a one comment. Overall, another one I'd like to make is that it is indeed good that we were started off on an electronic way rather than a paper-based way. We hope that it was easy enough for countries to fill this information in, and would welcome any feedback for any things we should keep in mind for the new system that will come on stream next year. But overall, by having all of this information electronically, it is much easier for us as a Secretariat literally to download, to collate, and to put together. and it will surely also be such for US parties when you consider the reports of other countries. So it is really an important part of the reporting structure. Yeah, let me leave it at that for right now.
Thank you, Claudia. And another excellent reporting question from Owidia, which is, when will the Secretariat publish an online reporting tool for the first full report?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Currently, the reporting tool, which was built for the first full question, was a pilot to test if this works and how well it works. Again, as an invitation to send us feedback or just to drop us a line or send us a message, so that we can now, in the design of the new tool or the larger tool, that we can take that into consideration. As you will see here, the guidance for the full reporting ought to be available in draft version from March to US countries as parties, and we will then very much welcome feedback and contextualization comments or anything else that will make it useful for you and for us to be able to supply you with the correct information, the useful information. And the tool is expected to be opened by the middle of next year, so that you will have 6 months as the tool being opened. That is the intention of the Secretariat.
Great. Moving on to a more general topic, Hamidullah asks if we could please explain how the assistance can be asked for the convention implementation by the member parties. So procedures for asking for assistance, and do we have our own assessing of implementation from the member parties? Claudia.
Sure, thank you. Since this is all about supporting implementation, this is of course a welcome question. The first part, how does one seek support for implementation that you may require at the national level? Article 13 and Article 14 really, maybe if I could ask just to take us forward to the overview of our articles. They really lay out what is available in terms of support for work in the to support implementation. And so on the one hand, Article 13 lays out our financial mechanism, because in addition, of course, to this implementation and compliance mechanism, we have a financial mechanism which consists of two components, the one being the Global Environmental Facility, which makes available large multi-year, multiple foci project. There you see displayed Article 13, the financial mechanism. So the GEF window, or the GEF makes available those larger projects and application through implementation agencies of a country's choice. So you could choose to work through UNEP, the Environment Program, or through UNDP, the Development Program, or through UNIDO, or through the World Bank, depending on what the context of your country is. Secondly, we also have a much smaller part in the financial mechanism, which is a direct access for a much smaller, more modest amount of money. But that amount of money is there specifically to support capacity building and technical assistance, and that is called the Specific International Program. We've been very lucky to have 2 rounds of projects on this already, and so we have 15 projects currently around the world in all regions, supporting all kinds of needs that have been identified by parties themselves that they see as priority for their to enable implementation. But it is not only the financial mechanism, of course, that is there. If you go and have a look at the detail of the Article 14, besides calling on every party to look within its own capabilities in its own country in terms of what it can put forward to aid the strengthening of implementation on Minamata, there is also the possibility to reach out to other countries that may have projects or programs that specifically look at such technical assistance, and we are aware of a number of them and donor countries are making available a number of them with regard to other partners again. So that could be one avenue. And then also we as a Secretariat have a still small but growing program on capacity building and technical assistance, where we assist countries. Currently we have, due to the very generous contribution of the European Commission for European Union, we have a project that supports countries on trade, and also which is of course one of the main topics that we also spoke about today, but also another angle or another component of that work is to support countries on emissions. And now most recently we've also received some contribution to help countries with regard to the 2020 product deadline. And you may have joined us for a session just in July, I think it was, Marianne and I were doing a session on the 2020 deadline in particular. It is this year, and we know that some countries are hoping for additional support on knowing where they stand with their implementation. And so we're very grateful that we have at the Secretariat level now some way of supporting that as well. And lastly, you asked, if I paraphrase it correctly, about do we as Secretariat have any other way to assess implementation? These national reports are very primary look into what countries are seeing. So they are really important, an important information source for countries. And in addition to that, we just basically keep as close an eye as possible as we can in terms of all of the projects that have either already been completed, that had been supported by the financial mechanism GEF component, or other such projects that we are aware of. And so we kind of keep, Marianne in particular, a transversal look in terms of what kind of work has been done, is being identified. And onto this topic is of course the very well-known MIAs, the Minamata initial assessments that were complete or in the process of being complete by many developing country parties, that really allowed them to scan where their needs are and to put that forward for now even more projects or more targeted interventions based on these early needs assessments. And just lastly to say, there's also another article in the convention that refers to national implementation plans, NIPs, Article 20. In contrast to perhaps some other conventions, this is not a requirement by the convention to have a NIP, but some countries have found it very useful to make a NIP for themselves, to make an implementation plan for themselves. And so we have, as far as I recall, Japan and Peru have shared with us their national implementation plans. And these are also very useful areas for us to get a view on how countries are doing.
Excellent, thank you. I don't know if our colleague Isaku Toda wanted to add anything about implementation plans. It's a very good question about whether the party has to submit national implementation plans dealing with mercury compounds, or its wastes.
Thank you, Marianne. I don't have much to add to Claudia's explanation, and differently from the Stockholm Convention, the Minamata Convention doesn't have a mandatory requirement for national implementation plan. It is in Article 20. There are provisions for specific plans. Firstly, the Article 7, artisanal small-scale mining. There's a mandatory provision for the national action plan if party decides that the SGM is more than insignificant in its territory. It has an obligation to prepare and submit national action plan on that. And also there are provisions in Article 8 and 9 about the national plan for addressing emissions and releases, which is not non-mandatory. And also, as Claudia mentioned, many countries are developing Minamata initial assessments, and there's no provision for Minamata initial assessments in the convention itself, but the funding agency JEF strongly encourages that MI reports be submitted to the Secretariat, and these the submitted reports are available on the website. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Well, we're winding down here, but we do have one additional related question on NIPS from Susanna. So regarding national implementation plans, she asks if parties are eligible for additional funding to develop a national implementation plan on Minamata. And maybe I'll just take the first comment on that myself, which is that because the convention does not require national implementation plans per se, there's no specific financial assistance for doing that. But as Isaku and Claudia both pointed out, the Minamata initial assessments that many countries have done, as well as for those countries who are doing ASGM national action plans, there has been significant support through the Global Environment Facility for working on those. And I'd like to ask my colleagues if you have anything to add on that.
Marianne, that was excellent. Maybe a small addition is just to say that we have seen in one successful SIP project that a country has requested as part of a package of other items, something in support of an implementation approach. So it's not an entire project on an implementation plan that would not necessarily have satisfied all the conditions of a SIP project, but it has come forward in a SIP context as part, in a very structured way, as part of other items that were imperative in that country's estimation for implementation. But per se, the way we know it in another convention, the Stockholm Convention, it's a different animal.
Great, thank you. Well, it looks like we've gotten through a very robust set of questions here. And of course, you're always welcome to contact us at the Secretariat with additional questions or concerns or suggestions. But with that, I think we've reached almost the end of our hour, so I'd like to turn back to Claudia to just close us out.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you, Lara. It's a pleasure to work with you. Thank you, Isaku, also for being online. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. The number was a very nice number to see, and also a number of people that, of course, we work with very closely, either on the implementation and compliance committee or through reporting, and all the other many in the Minamata extended family. Thank you for joining us. As mentioned, this session, this recording, and all of the PowerPoint presentation will be made available soon on our website. I think by tomorrow we should be able to have it up. And also please do check our online calendar, Minamata Online calendar, for future sessions coming up, both in the implementation and review and support stream of work, and also in the science stream of work. And with that, I'd like to thank you and wish you a very good day, evening, or morning, wherever we find you today. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thanks.